Last week I was contacted on LinkedIn by a former colleague and he sent me the following message. Mr. Buckley, hi. A bit of a random question for you. What tips and advice do you have for note-taking? It's an area I've always struggled with and I was wondering what your tips and advice would be for someone essentially starting out writing notes today. Well, Stuart, thanks so much for the message. This video is very much for you and for anybody else interested in taking notes, bullet journaling, or indeed anyone wanting to improve their productivity. And essentially what we're trying to answer is, where do you start? When it comes to note taking, what do you need to know? What do you need to do? So in this Tuesday tutorial, we'll take you through 5 top tips that will help you get started. And we'll also introduce a few books along the way. But first, one of the first questions that I'm always asked is, should you go digital or analog? Or is it a combination of both? And it's something that I've kind of battled with over the years. I've gone from kind of one extreme to the other and back again. And today I'm probably about 20% digital, 80% analog when it comes to note-taking, writing notes. And let me explain why. Think yourself 10 years from now and you're looking back at your notes that you made today. Can you find them? Where are they stored? Can you read them or can you understand them? Chances are you probably will, no matter whether it's digital or analog. You'll still be able to kind of put your fingers on them, paper format, absolutely. Technology wise, you should be able to. But think about 20 years from now. What do your notes look like? Where are they stored? And again, can you access them? And how much value are they adding to your life, in 20 years' time? Chances are that technology will have changed, dramatically in 20 years. But the good old-fashioned pen and paper won't. They'll still be around. And think even further out, technology is guaranteed to change. And I always look back at Norman Foster, and he's a famous architect. He's now in his late 80s. But if you were to visit the Norman Foster Foundation in Madrid, as I did 4 years ago, what you'll find is over 60 years of notes in the basement, all stored, archived perfectly in chronological order and project order in the basement of his foundation. And here's just a few photos that I took. What you'll see is all his kind of journals, all his files, neatly organised in this kind of library system that moves back and forth along the floor. On this side, we've got black journals, we've got black books, and they've all got little notes on them. They've been perfectly organised. The other side, we've got a different style of book. And there's umpteen volumes, there's umpteen shelves of these. You've got over 60 years worth. Now think how much technology has changed over the last 60 years. Yet still, Norman Foster still has his records, all his drawings, all his notes for the last 60 years perfectly organised. Now I look at this as something a bit of inspiration, and it's something I look to in terms of what inspires me when it comes to note taking. So really, start with the end in mind. Don't just think about today or next year or the year after. Think about your lifetime ahead. When it comes to note taking, the value of your notes you're taking today could really add value in the future, just like they do with Foster there. So start with the end in mind. So let's just talk about the EGSP framework when it comes to note taking. Now EGSP, that's something we talk lots about at 12 Scholars. It's on the wall behind me, and it's a way of setting expectations. And if we're to think about the future and our note taking, we can use 4 definitions to determine what success looks like. So we start with poor. Poor is where we always start the journey. To define poor, that would be a note-taking system that has added no value to your life. It's perhaps a waste of time. In 10 years' time, you probably may not be able to find those notes. You don't know where they're stored, they're perhaps out of date, they're inaccessible. That would be poor. It's unacceptable. Satisfactory, well, that's what you're prepared to accept as a minimum. So you've got hold of your notes, you know where they are. It may take some time, but you'll find what you want, but it'll just take time. I'm sure you've all been there. That'd be kind of satisfactory. Good, well, that's what we're prepared to accept. That's what we want. So what we're looking for is a note-taking system that's reliable, repeatable, that adds value, that perhaps adds compound value to our lives. And it's got that almost instant access. Excellent. Well, that's something that kind of you're expecting above good. It's something that you can argue instant access has added 10x the value to your life, and perhaps others as well. It's really got that compound kind of value to your lives. So 4 definitions there, and it's worth thinking about what sort of system do you want. Now, if you think about technology will go out of date. Maybe not in 12 months, but certainly 10, 20, 30 years. But an analog system won't go out of date. And that's why I always encourage anybody to start with an analog system. So let's look at those 5 top tips that I promised you. 5 ways to kind of get you started. And top tip number 1 is be that future orientated. Be more future orientated. So start with the end in mind. Use an analog system for notes and ideas. Think of it like a scrapbook for ideas. And if you go analog, you can't go wrong. It won't go out of date, and you'll always have it for the future. So top tip number 1. Number 2 is go hardback. So once you've found your notebook, go hardback. It's more sturdy, it lasts longer. You can balance coffee. So here's my notebook. You can balance 2 cups of coffee, great around the office. My preference is also squared paper. So I'll always use squared. I've tried lines, I've tried dots, I've tried blank pages. I'll always go back to squared, typically kind of 5mm squared paper, faint squared paper. So top tip 2, go hardback. Number 3, when it comes to opening your notes, I would always recommend start a fresh page every day. Also, kind of if you've got an important meeting, always start with a fresh page. Put the date, put exactly where you are, who's in the room. Get into a nice habit of every day start with a fresh page, and you won't go too far wrong. Number 4 is the time of day, and I'll always say in the first hour of your waking day, open your notes, open your bullet journal, and within the first hour, kind of write down kind of your thoughts. Plan the day. Within the first hour. Last thing is the final hour of your day. Before you go to bed, or perhaps when you're in bed and you're winding down. It really does help you download that information and help you switch off in the evening. And then what I've also got is middle thing. So first thing, last thing, and middle thing. So sometime during the day, during lunch, before lunch or after lunch, it's worthwhile picking up your notes just to kind of review kind of exactly where you are. Are you on track or off track, and what do you need to do differently for the rest of the day? If you're good, you can open your book several times throughout the day. But certainly as a minimum, I would suggest 3 times a day is when you need to look, when you need to review your notes, and make some notes. And then lastly, number 5, I've got there, think in ink. So get your notes down. It'll help you, clear your head. It'll help structure your thinking. It'll also help you think about the bigger picture. When you write things down, it'll put things into context. You can think about the bigger picture. You can also think about those micro actions. So what do you need to do now, next, and later, in terms of prioritization. And that's something that I'll use all the time. I'll kind of Moscow. That's the must do, should do, could do, won't do. Or I'll do a now, next, and later. And I've got that lots of times here. Pretty much on a daily basis. They're the sort of questions I'm asking myself. Because it really helps structure my own thinking. So they're kind of your 5 top tips. Be that future orientated, find a hardback book, start with that fresh page, think about 3 times a day, and then structure your thoughts, think in ink. So they're kind of to kind of get you started. Also thought I'd give you some bonus books, some homework to do as well. One of the books that I'd thoroughly recommend you get hold of when it comes to note taking or just your general productivity is this one here, Getting Things Done by David Allen. He's on there on YouTube. I'd also I'd recommend you get the book. And he talks about how your head, your brain is for having ideas, not for storing them. So he talks about several ways to get information out of your head and down on the printed page, or you using electronics as well. But thoroughly recommended book there. Second book is the Bullet Journal Method by Ryder Carroll, and that's a system that he recommends for bullet journaling. I use a system loosely based on that, and I'll certainly do a video shortly about how I actually take notes. This video was to kind of get you started, where do you need to start, but I'll make a video all about that in the near future. And then last one, and it's one I recently discovered, is how to take smart notes. And in here, Sonke Ahrens, he talks about 3 types of notes that you're making. They can be kind of fleeting notes, project notes, or permanent notes. Fleeting notes is just like an idea, get it down. A project note is something you're working on and you want it to be kind of semi-permanent, and a permanent note is something that you want to be published at some point in the future. And he talks about a system for how to structure those in terms of notes. So 3 books there. I might have mentioned them before on some of the earlier videos, and I'll certainly mention the bullet journal method or the method that I use in a soon to be released video. And then final note, if you study successful people, like I've done over the years, and I'm sure many of you have, what you'll find is note taking is taken seriously. So no matter how far back in time you go, Roman times, Middle Ages, right through to today, all successful people have been obsessive about taking notes. Think about your Warren Buffetts, your Charlie Mungers. And so what I ask you is kind of, how serious are you taking your notes? What I suggest is the more serious you are about taking notes, then the more successful you'll be in however you apply that thinking. So it's just something to think about there. And that's it. That's our Tuesday tutorial. So Stuart, hopefully there's a few things in there that'll get you started and anybody else interested in taking notes. This is just one of a series of videos that I've got on personal productivity, leadership, personal development. If you click around on our website or on YouTube, you'll find a few more. But thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Bob Buckley, and I look forward to seeing you next time.